No, that's all, that's all.
Mr. Dice, you had a comment?
Yes, I had been approached by a couple of the council people concerning an article that appeared in the newspaper, and it was addressed by an individual. I'm sorry to see he also left. And it talks about, the headline is, Monroeville hires private investigator to conduct internal probe. I've been doing this for more than 3 weeks, and I have found over the years, and I think some of you remember this probably, when the newspapers used to report news. And you'd read the newspaper and it would be factual. It would talk about what happened during the day's events. And it would be current events. It would be about the various things that are happening in the city, the state, and the federal government. And it was a reporting process. Well, that process has morphed into now newspapers create the news. And this is an example of creating news, this article that was put in the newspaper. And here's the creation. Monroeville hires private investigator to conduct internal probe. That's the headline. Doesn't that catch your attention? Oh man, I got to read that article. But it's simply just not true. And this is the unfortunate part of our business up here. Council's newly elected. And unfortunately, when you're newly elected, you think everybody thinks you're the best thing since sliced bread. Well, believe it or not, the newspaper people, and I'm going to tell you this from experience, are not your best friends. They're not there to try to report what a nice guy you are. What they're there to do is to report and create a news event. And that's what's happened here. I will tell you that there has been discussions concerning the previous reports that were done by council. Geez, we've discussed it every month since I can't remember last about the reports concerning HIPAA. And then the ancillary issue of whether or not there was privacy issues. But the thrust of the entire investigation or the entire inquiry was surrounding this HIPAA issue. And everybody remembers meeting after meeting. I remember meeting after meeting where people would complain that the entire investigation hadn't been concluded. People hadn't been interviewed. People who had been requested to be given interviews weren't given the opportunity to give interviews under that previous investigation. Interviews were conducted and information was reported that now it turns out when you talk to the individual who gave the report initially is totally inaccurate, almost to the point where it's misrepresentative of, where now there are statements authored by individuals as opposed to prior to statements being authored only by the investigator, not by the individual, who discount or otherwise recant what was said. And council's been stirring on this, I think, since probably November election, months before the seating of this council. Now we have the entire new council seated, and you saw in January they began the process of trying to vet themselves of what's happened in the past year. And they're new. They don't, you know, they've never experienced. This is a life experience that none of them have ever had. You know, how many of you out there have been involved in such a complex meandering of individuals and statements being made about each other? And what do you do? And that's been the subject of executive session discussions, how to handle it, what to do about it. And they said to me, what would you do? What do you think, Bruce? You know, you've done this before. You've been doing it for a while. Well, you know, one of the things you can do, my suggestion was, is to possibly hire an investigator to investigate the investigator. Take a look at what was said. Go back to some of these statements that you think may have some reason to be re-reviewed. there are things out there that still are hanging chad, so to speak. There are still things that aren't completely clear. And I think this council wants to bring back and vet this process, bring back to the people a complete report, not on just the HIPAA violation, but also the privacy matter and all the other things that people who didn't get a chance to be spoken to get the opportunity to speak to them, to clear up any ambiguities and go through that process. Well, how do you do that? Well, maybe you hire an investigator. Now, does that mean we've hired an investigator? Well, Monroeville hires private investigator to conduct internal probe. That's what you call creating. That's just not happened yet. There is an individual, there is a firm, CSI. We've used them at Gateway School District. I've used them in other areas. I suggested, do you want to talk to them? No one in council has met these individuals. They've not met with them, never discussed anything with them. I said, Bruce, go out and find out, are they interested? And I did that. And they are interested in getting involved. And they have made some initial inquiries without a contract. They don't have an agreement with us. There's no understanding. There's been no situation where a contract has been signed by anybody. Tim has received a proposal. It's on the agenda, and all you have to do is read the agenda, if somebody would do it, under new business, item 1. So, right now, there is no contract. On Tuesday night, we're going to be seeking approval to enter into a contract that has a not to exceed $10,000. Is it necessary? I think what's necessary is for this council to come to some final conclusion on this matter as quickly as we can. I think that it took 18 months or so with the last situation. We're talking about getting this done in a month and a half, and bringing it back to the public, because I think there's still a number of the public that have questions about what went on here. And as a result, council has given me the direction to go to them and make this inquiry. But there's no deal yet. There's no contract with an entity for an internal probe. It troubles me that council then gets interviewed individually. And of course, again, in the spirit of trying to cooperate with the newspaper people, you're new. First thing you do is, hey, look, this is what I think happened. This is what I heard. As a practical matter, nobody's met any of these people. And it's just unfortunate that this kind of situation continues to go on. It's a lesson for council. Know this. We have a communications contact officer. The last administration stuck to that. It was a good policy. Our communications officer is the manager. I would suggest to you that if anybody from the news media contacts you about your wife, your children, what car you drive, tell them to contact the manager. Don't talk to them about these sensitive issues, because it's not appropriate. There should be one entity, one individual that communicates on behalf of this board. And I would suggest that you follow that policy in the future. If you read the article, there's one line. Solicitor Bruce Dice could not be reached for comment. You're right. I'm not talking to him, because I know what goes on. That kind of advice is good advice for you, too, because, again, if you think that these entities are going to report the news, they're not. They're going to create news, and that's what they do. So that's my advice for future. That's all I have.